Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Joe Reingold, and I am here with Patty Traub, and today is Monday, February 18th, 2019. Hello there. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So, Patty, tell us what you know about your grandparents, your parents, where they lived, what they did for a living, and how life was like in those early days.
I would love to tell you all that I know. Unfortunately, I don't know lots. We'll start with my father's family. They were from somewhere in Russia. My grandfather was the only one of my grandparents that actually came over from Russia. I think he came over when he was 7 years old. And they settled in St. Paul, Minnesota. He had several brothers and sisters, and they were very, very poor. I guess once you come over, it's you kind of just have to start again. I don't know what business my great-grandfather was in, but I think that something happened to him early in his life where my grandfather had to drop out of school to work to be able to support the family. Although when he was in school, he fell in love at a very young age with my grandmother. She was a very beautiful woman. But her mother was not happy about this relationship because they weren't rich, but they had some money, and my grandfather's family had no money. So she did not want them together. But it lasted for several years, and then when my great-grandmother got very upset, she decided to send my grandmother to Kansas City away from my grandfather. At the station when he left, a cute story is that he cut one of her curls and he put it in his pocket and he saved that. And she went down to Kansas City with some relatives, and they started the Katz drugstore, which was a very famous drugstore in Kansas City, so she worked there. And my grandfather just was so in love with her. He worked so hard he shined shoes, he sold sandwiches, he did whatever he could so that he could earn enough money to go down to Kansas City, where my grandmother was. And he knew that he had to prove to her family that he could support her. So he started in Kansas City, Missouri, at 19th and Main. He started a little clothing, but he had kind of a pawn shop, and he also loaned money. He had a partner who had the money, and he could loan money. One day, my grandfather was outside of his store, and he noticed that there were like prisoners from Leavenworth who would come into the Kansas City train terminals called the Union Station. They would walk a couple blocks from the Union Station past my grandfather's store on their way to downtown to see if they could find a job. And these men did not have any clothes. All they had on their backs were the clothes that they had before they went to prison, and they gave them those clothes back. So he thought, well, if all these people are walking past my store, I'm going to get more clothing. So he kind of got rid of the pawn shop, and he opened Michael's Men's Clothing Store. And to this day, it is still there in the same location, and it has supported many, many families since then. It's over 100 years old. It's still at the same location. And when he got enough money, he asked my grandmother to marry him. And they had a wonderful love affair, and they were married in Kansas City. My mother's parents, I don't know one of her family that came over from Europe. I do know that they were from Germany, but they must have come over many years in advance because I didn't know anyone that immigrated. They lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and let's see, I'm getting confused. Okay. My mother's mother, my grandmother lived in Philadelphia, and my father, my grandfather, I believe, was in St. Louis, Missouri. So at that time, my grandmother's father, they said, "Go west, young man," and he decided to go west to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Wow.
And he drove the Pony Express from Kansas City to New Mexico and back and forth. And he has several tales of when, Indians approached and troubles that they had back in those times. And it was so cold when he would drive the wagon and stuff that one of his fingers got frozen to the reins. So he lost one of his fingers during that time. Somehow, and I'm not sure how, my grandmother and my grandfather ended up in St. Louis, Missouri. They also met in school when they were very young, and my grandpa says he remembers the beautiful red coat that my grandma wore to the first day of school of kindergarten. So both of my grandparents were very smitten with my grandmothers. My other grandfather also had to drop out of school. Really tough times back then. And he decided that he would become a pharmacist. Well, of course, in those days, it wasn't the requirements that you have now. He bought a small drugstore in St. Joe. And instead of being the actual one that filled the pills, back then you had to actually grind the medicine and combine it and do all those kind of things. So that's what my grandfather did. The store was below the home where his parents lived. He had a couple sisters that were not married, and they all lived upstairs. And at the end of the day, they would come down, like at 8 or 8:30, they would come down to the drugstore, and they would all go to the soda fountain where they would have sodas and stuff and catch up on the day. My grandmother, once they got married and my grandfather was, making a nice living, my grandmother would come over to the drugstore in the afternoon, and she would help in whatever way that she could. After a while, they decided that they would move to Kansas City. So my grandmother and my grandfather moved to Kansas City. But let's see, that was after my mother has an older sister that was 10 years older than she was. And then when my mom was born, her parents were much older. And of course, her sister was so much older that my mom was kind of an only child. But they, by that time, had means. And my grandfather bought his first Model T, I guess. That was one of the very first cars that came out. And let's see. So my mom didn't live very far away from where my dad lived in Kansas City. They did not know each other, but my mom knew who my dad was because my dad was very handsome, and he was a jock. He played basketball in high school, and he played football in high school, and he was very good looking. And there was a dance coming up, and the guy said to Howard, "Come on, why don't you go with us to this dance?" And he goes, "No, I really don't know anybody." And this one friend of theirs said, "Well, I know a lady. Her name is Marjorie Optican. And, I can fix you up with her." So my mother was very excited, and they went out on this date, and they did fall in love. My parents were very, very young when they got married. My mom was only 18. My dad had just turned 20. But they tried to go to school. They both tried to go to college. They both were enrolled in college. And my father was just getting anxious because he knew he wanted to work in my grandfather's store. So he thought, why should I go to college? I know where I'm working. I know who I love. My mom also went to college for a little while, and she just was in love. And so she decided to come back. At that time, there was the war. And all the young men, including my dad, went down to sign up to go to war. And my mom, was really upset, but my dad said to her, if for any reason I don't make it, they don't take me, there's not going to be a reason why they wouldn't take me, we'll get married. So my dad and his brother, they went down to register, to sign up to go to war. And they said to my dad, they went, oh my gosh, we won't take you because you have a hernia. Well, first of all, my dad had no idea he had a hernia. And second, why wouldn't they take me because I had a hernia? So my dad was really very upset. And he felt as though, people were looking down upon him. He really wanted to go. He really wanted to serve his country. And they said no, so he had a very, very hard time with that. But my mother, when she heard that they turned him down, she was so excited. She goes, let's get married. So they did. They got married very young. And my parents were married 72 years. They had a beautiful, beautiful marriage. And my father worked in the store. It was a men's retail store in Kansas City called Michael's. And let's see, my mother did not work. My parents were very traditional from Kansas City. The man would work and the woman would stay home. She loved to cook. And
When did you come along?
well,
Or your siblings or whoever?
yes. I have two older brothers. My oldest brother, his name is Rick. He was born when my parents were just living in a one bedroom. They rented a place on the Country Club Plaza, and they had like what's called a Murphy bed at that time. When they would walk in and somebody had a coat, the closet was behind the Murphy bed. So they would have to pull down the Murphy bed. They would have to put the coat in the closet, and then they'd have to put the Murphy bed back up. But, so my older brother was born, and then 3 years later, Kenny, my other brother, was born. And they decided they were going to wait for a little while before having another one. But guess what? I came earlier than expected. And when my mom found out she was pregnant, of course, they had to move. And we lived in a very nice 3-bedroom home in Kansas City, Missouri. And I was born 2 years later. And being the only girl and the baby, I was quite spoiled. I had a very, very, very special relationship with my dad. I looked like my dad. One of my other brothers, Kenny, looks like my dad. And my oldest brother, they always said that maybe he was from the mailman. He was real tall and thin and blonde. And then my brother and I came along. My oldest brother was very nurturing towards me. He never really would accept me as an equal. I was always his little sister, so he was always taking care of me. But my brother that's 2 years older, Kenny, we were very close, and we got along really well. When we were growing up in Kansas City, Missouri, we belonged to a conservative synagogue, and my dad was very traditional. We celebrated every holiday We would always keep, Passover. When my father's parents passed away, he went twice a day to the Minions to pray for them. And I just remember I used to love to go with my father to services because at that time it was a great big beautiful synagogue, and we had our names. My dad's name was on our seats, and I loved sitting there. I would sit next to my dad and I would play with his talit, and it just was very, very special times for me. My mother was not as religious, which is interesting because her father came from a kosher religious home. So it's just interesting to me how you go down through the generations and you kind of make it, work for you. The one interesting thing about me growing up is that my father, working in men's retail, would have to work late from Thanksgiving Day all the way through Christmas, going on to the first of the year. Starting Thanksgiving, the store would stay open until 8 o'clock. So my father, I never saw him barely from Thanksgiving to Christmas Day. So he missed out on a lot of Hanukkahs. So my father, who loved to celebrate, we would have Santa Claus Day on Christmas. That was the first day we'd see him. That was the first day he had off. So we didn't celebrate Christmas as a religious holiday. We just celebrated as Santa coming on that day because my dad was home. Let's see.
Were they involved in anything else in the Jewish community at that time?
Oh, yes. Well, my father worked really hard at the store. He would go down, 5:30 in the morning, and it's funny, he would call every night when he was leaving the store, which was usually at 5:30. And then when we would hear him coming, my mom, everybody, we would go to the door. But my dad was very interested in the Shriners Hospital at that time. My dad was a Eagle Scout, which was very important in my family. My father, my two brothers, my son, a bunch of us are very active in Scouts. My father was active in the Shriners Hospital, and every year they would put on a golf tournament at my dad's store, and everybody would have to pay whatever the price was, and the store would give everybody the same clothes to wear at the tournament. So here, if you went by the Meadowbrook Country Club with them that day, you'd see all these hundreds of men dressed up in the same outfits. But all the money they donated to the Shriners Hospital. And then I believe it started into Scottish Rite. Now, I'm not sure if those are two separate things or what it is, but my father definitely was a Shriner. My mom was very involved also. She was involved in the National Council of Jewish Women. She was one of the first people that we had Head Start in Kansas City, which was a preschool enrollment that you went and you helped the kids start schooling, before the school age. And that was a very important program. But she also got involved with the gift shop at the what we called the old age home at that time. She bought and she arranged and she had people working on the gift shop and stuff. And that was really her love. The two things, a Head Start and the gift shop at the home of the aged. And what's interesting about that is I also was a candy striper there, but in those times when you worked at an old person's home, it didn't smell very good. So I was kind of turned off to working with older people because of that smell, and it was not a good first experience for me. But of course, as the times went on, they built a brand new, gorgeous retirement home called Village Shalom in Overland Park, Kansas. My parents were very selfless, and when they were getting older, I guess maybe they were maybe 80 or so, they decided to sell our big home, which we had gone from our small home in Kansas City, Missouri, to a much larger home in Overland Park, Kansas, because the school district at the time, Kansas City's, wasn't doing so well, and they were starting these brand new schools in Kansas. So we moved over to Kansas, and we lived in the same address on Catalina since I was in 5th grade all the way through, when I graduated high school and longer. But my parents decided that they would do a mitzvah for us kids, that they would move out of this house and, get rid of all the stuff and downsize and everything so that we didn't have to do that. And they moved into a villa at the new retirement, which was called Village Shalom. This was an independent house from the other house, and they loved it. My father had a hard time moving because he was a gardener. He used to, he loved growing tomatoes and vegetables and everything. Well, they found this villa that the land behind them was owned by the Menorah Hospital at the time, and my father went to the board of directors of Menorah Hospital, and he said, "Can I plant a garden back there?" And they said, "Sure, we're not ready to build our parking lot or whatever, go ahead." So my father, he was out there, and he just had rows and rows of all these vegetables, and he loved to take little baskets to all the people that lived in the neighborhood. They got to have fresh tomatoes and beans and corn and broccoli, and he just loved that. So they were very happy there. And but as they got older and as they got sicker, the nice thing about living at this retirement is that you have first availability to move down to a mother called the Big House, which was the home that had the different types of care there. My father got sick. I think he had to have a pacemaker in, and then I don't know, but anyway, they would go down there for care. And as they got older, my father actually started to get dementia. And my mother really didn't know what it was back then, but he would fall and she couldn't get him up, and there was just things that happened, and so it was a very, very, very rough decision, but my mom decided to move my dad into further care, and therefore she didn't want to stay by herself in the villa, so she moved into another section of Village Shalom. So my mom was at one end and my dad was at the other end. Actually, if you remember the hate crime that happened in Kansas City several years ago, where a gentleman went to the Jewish Community Center in Overland Park, Kansas, and he shot around, and then he came over to Village Shalom and he was shooting. Actually, there was one person at the JCC that was murdered, and there was one person at Village Shalom that was murdered. I actually was there at that time, and Village Shalom did a quick lockup. And we were at my dad's room, but my mom had to go back to her room for some reason I don't remember. And the lady was shot right outside my mom's window. So there she lay on the ground. And the even sadder part was both people who were murdered were not even Jewish. But of course it made everyone very nervous, and more security and everything was going on at that time. So my parents had a wonderful end of their life. They were with people they knew. They were with people they loved.
And you were not living there at the time, right?
No.
You went to visit.
Exactly.
So, okay.
My brother and I, Kenny and I, lived in Dallas. My older brother, Rick, lived in Kansas City with my parents, and he had 3 boys, and I had lots of cousins and everything. So my older brother was actually taking care of my mom and my dad. right after my dad passed away. My brother, of course, was even more important with my mom, but unfortunately, my older brother, who had been sick, he had Crohn's and he had a lot of other things. He passed away, which was very unexpected. And when he got sick, he called me to come immediately to Kansas City so I could take care of my mom because he knew that he would be in the hospital. He didn't make it out of the hospital. But one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life was tell my mom that her son had died.
Preceded her.
Yes. She, ever since my father passed away, she was doing pretty good, but then she would just say, you know, why am I alive? You know, I can't do anything for anybody. She always was a giver. And when she got old, she couldn't give anymore. She felt that way. But all of her friends loved her. My mother was hysterical, and she had a really kind of nasty mouth. She loved dirty jokes. But when I had to tell her that my brother died, she was totally devastated. You know, it's, why didn't God take me? Why did he take your brother? And it was very hard times for all of us. And that last, she lived another year after that. It was very hard times for all of us.
So what brought you here, away from that area?
When I was growing up in Kansas City, Kansas City was a beautiful, lovely town. It was, I grew up like in an Ozzie and Harriet type home. We all loved each other. We got along. I had a nice Jewish boyfriend. I had best friends. For some reason, when I got in high school, I just felt I needed to get away from there. I just needed to fly and go away. So, although my brothers were not able to go away for college, my dad said, sure, honey, you can go wherever you want. So I went away to college. I first went to the University of Arizona because my hair wouldn't curl. And then after 2.5 years, I transferred to the University of Texas because I knew people that were there. And I met my husband my senior year, and it was time to graduate. So it was time for us to either get engaged or be over with. And growing up in my conservative family, I had learned to go to school, get married, have children, and live happily ever after. I had no other choices available to me. I was never encouraged to have a career or to do well in school. I was always just, Patty, just be pretty and marry and have lots of babies. So this is what I was supposed to do after college. It was my turn to get married and have babies. So Larry was my husband, and he ironically loved men's clothing. He had an opportunity to move to Chicago, Illinois with Hart, Schaffner, and March to be trained. So when we got married, we moved to Chicago. It was really fun. We were there for about a year, and Larry would also have to go to New York for selling season, so I would go with him. So we'd live in Chicago 2 months, and then we'd move to New York. We'd live in a hotel off of Central Park South, all expenses paid, and then we'd move back to Chicago, and then we'd move to New York. So it was a very nice, fun year. But after that, Larry could not stand the cold. He was from Houston, and we lived off of Central Park South, and we'd have to walk up to the end of the corner to get the bus, and he just did not like it. So he had an opportunity to move back to Dallas, and he got a showroom at the Apparel Mart, and he began his successful career selling men's wholesale clothing. So my family was in retail, and my husband was in wholesale. So everybody got along and talked about men's clothes, and everybody loved clothes but me. I am not a clothes person whatsoever, but that's okay.
I want you to show us your
Yes.
artwork here.
My father's family was very artistic, especially my Uncle Jerry, who was my father's oldest brother. He was the only one that moved out of Kansas City. When he was young, he moved to Los Angeles. And there he wasn't advertising for some big companies he drew. But his love was Judaic art. And he loved paper cutting. So I don't know if you can see, but this is actual from hand paper cutting. And this is one of his most famous pieces that he did for the American Jewish Committee. And they actually have it up in the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., this exact piece. So, since he enjoyed that so much, when my boys were bar mitzvahed, not Jason, but when my twins were bar mitzvahed, he said he would like to do an invitation for us. So he asked me what my twins liked to do, and he came up with this beautiful invitation. It's my twin boys. It's got the date of the bar mitzvah on there. And then in each of these little Jewish stars, he has the sports. He has tennis and soccer and baseball and golf, and those were the years that we put the kids' pictures on the invitations.
Shows up very well, actually, yeah.
Good. I was very, very, very proud
Beautiful.
of that, and that was his gift to them.
Very nice.
And when my father retired from the men's clothing business, he had a lot of hobbies, which was great at that time because he retired kind of early. He loved to paint. But together with his brother, they came up with this patented design, which of course is a Jewish star. But in Hebrew are the letters that say Shalom. So they have that patented, and in Kansas City at Village Shalom, my father has one of these statues that is huge, and it's lit, and it's just so beautiful, and I'm so proud. He really wanted us to find some place in Dallas that would do this. I think we missed our calling at Temple Shalom because this would have been absolutely perfect for them. But this is the exact copy. This is a metal copy of that design.
Beautiful.
So I'm very proud.
Absolutely
that.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
And you yourself, you're modest, but you're fairly, in a way, creative, artistic. So tell us what you do now.
Well, I am so fortunate that I fell into a job that I just loved. As I told you, when I grew up, I was not encouraged to do anything, so I never worked. And I went to college, of course, to learn home economics, so I could learn to cook and sew and all those things that I would need to be a wife. I loved being married and having children. I wanted a lot of children. My husband only wanted 2. So when I was pregnant the second time, I got really large. And my mom says, you need to go and find out if there's more than one baby in there. So we didn't have sonograms at the time. So I went and had an x-ray. And I'll never forget the little tech going, come here, Patty, I want to show you something. And there in my tummy, I could see one baby this way and one baby that way. So my boys are identical, which is not hereditary. It is just luck that little baby split in 2, and that I have 3 children instead of 2. So I feel so lucky about that.
Are they all here?
They all live in Dallas. My 3 boys live here, and my 5 grandchildren live here.
What do your sons do?
My oldest son, he knew what he wanted to do from when he was in junior high. He was one of these little kids that walked around with his video camera wherever he went. And he went to film school. He went to college. And he went out to California to be the next Steven Spielberg. Unfortunately, that did not work out. So on his 30th birthday, I got a call from him, and he said, Mom, I'm ready to come home. Can I come home? And I'm like, no, that was my 40th birthday. No, my 40th. His 30th. I don't know. Anyway, I think he was turning 30, and he said, can I come home? And I said, sure. I've been wanting him to come home for a long time. Because when I got divorced, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. It was the time of when my boys were having their bar mitzvahs, and I loved, my oldest son Jason was not a dancer, so he said to me, Mom, if you make me dance one time, I'm leaving. So I knew I had to plan something that was not a dance. So we had a big carnival, which was so much fun with the fortune teller and all the stuff going on. And then for Mitch and Matt's bar mitzvah, which was after we had gotten divorced, I decided to do, since they were twins, a double dare party. I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but at the time there was a TV show called Double Dare, and if you didn't get the question right, then they would pour, like pudding on your head or something. Anyway, I planned this whole double dare party, which was incredible. And one of my friends said, if you help me with my child's mitzvah, I'll pay you. And it was like, really? So I'm so lucky that one person asked me, and another person asked me, and another person asked me. And I mostly 90% worked with Jewish people in Dallas. And when my little kids started to get married, the ones that I helped with their bar and bat mitzvahs, they called me again. And they said, will you please help with my wedding? So it was so nice to be able to go and to help with weddings, and something that I had no training whatsoever. It just all came from my heart. We didn't have contracts. It was just I'll be happy to do it for you. And it was a very, very special time in my life to be in the middle of all of these people's very special, happy days of their life, that I had a part in making it so special. So I was very, very fortunate. So when my oldest son called and said, I'm ready to come home, I said, oh, I've got all these mitzvahs and stuff that you can do. Well, that isn't really what he wanted to do, but he did come home, and he started in that business. He is still in that business, and he has an incredible business. He not only does bar mitzvahs and weddings, but he does a lot of corporate things, and he has been very successful in that. He lives here in Dallas. My twins both live here in Dallas. They got married 5 days apart. Mitch, who is older by 9 minutes, I think, he is in commercial real estate in Dallas. He specializes in restaurants, and I'm very fortunate. Again, he has done very well, and he lives in a beautiful home with his wife, who lived across the street from us, but they didn't know each other at the time. They have 3 children. They have Noah, who is a girl, N-O-A. They have Josh, and they have Suri. And my other twin was Matt, and Matt did not want to start a corporate job right away. So he kind of had a little bit more of my personality, and he goes, Mom, what should I do, And I said, oh, it'd be so much fun to work at Club Med. And so he wrote to Club Med, and he got a job down in Punta Cana, and he was the tennis instructor down there. Oh. And I took Mitch, and we went down to visit him, and then he went to Copper Mountain in the wintertime, and he taught skiing. And he got a little tired of working at Club Med, so then he thought, I'm going to apply to cruise ships. So he had a job on cruise ship, and I've never been on a cruise because I get motion sick, but he was at the pool, and he tells everybody what to do, and he had such a good time. And he met his wife on a cruise ship. She's from Warsaw, Poland, and she was working on the cruise ship, and they met there and fell in love. And as I said, they got married 5 days after Mitch, and he has a beautiful home out in Plano. They live about a mile apart. And Matt has 2 girls. He has a daughter named Isabel, and he has another daughter named Gabriella. And they are all beautiful and sweet, and I'm just very blessed.
Your family really has grown here in Dallas, hasn't it?
Yes, yes, it
And you're
has.
lucky they're all here.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful.
Absolutely, no
Yeah,
question.
So, Patty, what else are you involved in yourself? I don't know if you're a member of a synagogue yet, or if you're in any Jewish or secular organizations.
Yes, I grew up conservative, but when my husband and I started to have children, we decided it was best to belong to Temple Emmanuel. So, yes, I have belonged to Temple Emmanuel for years and years and years. Since I was working in the Jewish population, I was at Temple all the time. I did lots of mitzvahs there. I did lots of weddings there. I'm very fortunate to be able to work with the Jewish people. I started volunteering when I retired. Unfortunately, my body did not hold out very well as I was working. I had never taken a business class, so I didn't know about hiring other people to do things for me in my job. So I was the one that was schlepping tables and putting things up and doing all that, and my body paid for it, unfortunately. So I had to retire, but I've been very active in Temple Emmanuel. I've been very active in Jewish Family Service. I've been active in the Federation, and I've also been active in National Council of Jewish Women. Since I was a professional event planner, they all got my name, and I've loved helping put on these big events because it just is something that is easy for me and that I enjoy doing. So I've done that for the events. I've gotten my children and my grandchildren involved with volunteering. For the past 2 Christmases, we went and we delivered Meals on Wheels. And I just think that you need to start children out young, knowing and feeling that it's good to do things for other people. I'm very active in a program called Hippie that the National Council of Jewish People do. And now I'm in charge of helping a book launch for the National Council of Jewish Women. They've written a book about all the different things that they have done in the 106 years of council, and it turned out to be a beautiful, lovely coffee table book. So we're having a launch for that. We're inviting all the people that supported us for all those years and gave us money so that we could go out and we could do all these wonderful things for children, adults, for everybody in the community. So that's coming up real soon. And I feel very honored to be able to help in any way that I can.
You've done so many wonderful and varied things with your life, but I want to ask you a question. It might be a tough one, maybe not. Can you think of something that you are the most proud of? It could be anything you like.
Yes, I do. Actually, it's kind of easy. I loved being a mom, and I've loved being a grandmother ever since my grandchildren were little bitty. I have taken them by myself for a few hours to spend just grand time with them. And once that they started school, since I have 5 of them, after school each day, I pick up each one. On Monday it's Gabby, on Tuesday it's Izzy, on Wednesday it's Josh. And I pick them up after school. We go get a treat, we do something, I take them to their activities. And I kept saying that I would do this until they didn't want to do it with me anymore. Well, my oldest, Noah, is going to be 13, and she still wants me to pick her up after school. So I feel like such a special person that my grandkids and I have a very, very unique and loving and special relationship.
That is truly beautiful.
Thank you.
Before we end, is there anything else you would like to add to the interview?
I would just like to say that I've had lots of ups and downs in my life, and I feel as though at the time it was, of course, very difficult to go through this, but I think that I've become a totally different person than I was when I was younger. And I think with each life experience, whether it's good or it's bad, I think you grow and I think you learn. And I think because of my life's experiences that I have become a much nicer and calmer and more accepting person. And even though my parents told me to be less than, I feel like that I've turned into a very strong, independent person that I hope my children and grandchildren are very proud of.
I'm sure they are. Thank you so much, Patty. It's been a
Thank you
pleasure.
very much. Thank you.